Looking forward to working with you and your newly elected executive. And let me congratulate each and every one of you, mayors and councillors, on your recent elections and re-elections to municipal councils up and down Alberta. Thank you for the spirit of public service that motivated you to put your name on the ballot. Because we all know it's a lot easier to tear down than to build up, and it's hard to lead, especially at a time of crisis like we've been going through. You took on the challenge, you earned the confidence of your constituents, and I just want to say thank you and congratulations. And we look forward, as Alberta's government, to working with you in a spirit of collaboration. I think one of the advantages of you at the municipal government level is the nonpartisan nature of municipal government. It allows you perhaps to seek more consensus and collaboration than happens sometimes at the federal or provincial level in the parliamentary system. And we have a lot to learn from you on that. There will always be differences in your councils, differences in our population, differences between the different orders and levels of government. But I truly believe we can and should be Team Alberta. When we have disagreements, we can express them without being disagreeable. Because at the end of the day, we're all sent here by our constituents to do the same job, to serve Albertans and to make this a strong and prosperous province. Now, I want to give you some examples of just some of those points of collaboration. There are dozens, perhaps hundreds, but the Edmonton's new mayor, Mayor Sohi, was in my office 2 weeks ago for our first formal meeting, and his very number one issue was concern about folks who are sleeping rough in Edmonton as we approach a cold Alberta winter, and an urgent need to expand the number of shelter spaces available for those folks who are without homes. And immediately went to 5 of our ministers and said, this is an urgent priority. It's a humanitarian issue. We need to act quickly. And we managed to put together a package of $22 million of additional support for homeless shelters and women's shelters, including $1.5 million to help create an overflow emergency space at the Commonwealth Stadium. Much of this necessary because of the dislocation of COVID, the impact of public health orders on homeless shelters. But I just want to offer that as an example of how we can find solutions together, and we can do so quickly and collaboratively. Where I think 3 years ago, when I was opposition leader and I met with the mayor and council of Fort Saskatchewan and the folks out in the industrial heartland, and they shared with me their exciting vision about turning that into the one of the great engines of the Canadian economy, and the policy vision to get there. And one element of that was to provide municipalities the ability to offer long-term municipal property tax incentives, recognizing that we are often competing with jurisdictions around the world who do that as a matter of practice. And so we put that in my party's platform and then legislation in 2019, and it has been a difference maker. I can tell you, and Fort Saskatchewan knows this, that we have landed the largest private sector investment in over 15 years in Alberta, the Dow net zero emitting ethylene cracker, thanks in part to that policy. And I see more and more municipalities some were hesitant at first, but embracing that tool as an extra tool in the toolkit to promote jobs and economic development. Thank you. Another good example of collaboration. Or former Mayor Nenshi approached me before the 2020 provincial budget to say his number one priority was ensuring that we could continue the low-income transit pass. And I wasn't even aware of that lapsing. I wasn't aware of it as an issue. We made sure that was included in Budget 2020. So from the big cities to the smaller towns, from economic issues to social needs, we can and must seek collaboration. That doesn't mean we'll always agree. And I remind you all that just as you have fiscal limits, so too does the province. We've been on, as often is the case in our history, a bit of a fiscal roller coaster, but at the end of the day, there is only one taxpayer, and those taxpayers expect us, as Albertans, to live within our means. But I do want to say a special thank you for your collaboration throughout the difficult COVID period of the past 20 months, when we've been faced by unprecedented challenges, the biggest public health crisis in a century. And really last year, we were hit by 2 huge recessions. The global economic collapse, on top of it, the largest collapse in energy prices in history. where we were selling Alberta oil at minus $30 for a period. And serious people were wondering how long, like if this could go on for years, if we were looking at a 1930s scenario here in Alberta. Well, thankfully, we've begun to see very strong economic recovery. I'll say more about that in a moment. But we have been tested. All Albertans have been tested and frustrated with the public health measures necessary to limit viral spread and to protect our healthcare system. And there has been, let's face it, there's no point sugarcoating it, a divisive debate within our province and in many of your municipal councils as well, in the legislature and in our general, reflecting the division on how best to respond in our general population. But I want to say thank you to Albertans for rising to the challenge. Because of their good efforts, we have this fourth wave under control. And I want to encourage you to continue cooperating with the Chief Medical Officer and to put forward those important public health messages. Let's continue to drive up those vaccine rates. There's a great success story there. We've gone from about 77% first dose coverage at the beginning of September to 88% now. We're rolling out booster shots to the elderly and the immunocompromised and Indigenous people. Any Indigenous person over the age of 18 can receive one now because of their unique vulnerability to this disease. And today, I understand Health Canada has authorized the safe use of the Pfizer pediatric COVID-19 vaccine, and we'll be making that available to parents and children between the ages of 5 and 11 as soon as we get supply. So let's continue to protect our communities by doing the right things. At the same time, we were partners in responding to the economic crisis. Alberta's government rushed with $500 million of discretionary additional municipal infrastructure grants to help us provide some counter-cyclical stimulus to the 2 recessions we were coping with last year. And that now, of course, has moved into a longer-term infrastructure boost for the province, $21 billion over 3 years, that is building schools and hospitals, roadways, and wastewater plants right across the province, including huge projects like the Springbank Dam and the LRTs in collaboration with the cities and the federal government, all of them important projects. And a lot more exciting projects that we're collaborating on, like high-speed internet service. We've announced an additional $100 million. We are trying to do that to leverage additional federal dollars and investments by the private sector telecommunication companies. Ultimately, we're trying to put together a $1 billion package to help us to get to close to 100% coverage for acceptable high-speed service across the province. We want no community left out of the digital economy. We want remote and rural towns and communities to be able fully to participate in the prosperity of the future economy. And we thank you for your leadership on that as well. Now, speaking on the issue of collaboration, I also want to thank and commend municipalities for having done the hard, difficult, detailed, grinding work of the intermunicipal collaboration frameworks. The deadline was hit in April, and I understand that 98% of municipalities complied with the necessity to finalize those framework agreements, and the other 2% have gone into mandatory dispute resolution. But that's another great example of collaboration, because I know there are often tense and difficult issues between RMs and urban municipalities, so thank you for your collaboration on that. Speaking of collaboration, I know there are many people concerned here about the concept of an Alberta provincial police force, so let me speak to that for a moment. Of course, Alberta did have its own provincial police force before the Great Depression, and 3 of the 10 Canadian provinces always have had, or have had through most of their history, Newfoundland and Labrador, Ontario, and Quebec. And I think it is worth taking the time to study the potential benefits, structure, and cost of a Alberta provincial police force because of the huge potential of having a strong community police model in this province. We value and appreciate the contribution of the RCMP and their historic role in the settlement of the West and in the policing of our province. At the same time, we know that there has been a serious crisis in rural crime over the past several years, and one of the challenges is maintaining a stable workforce with the ever constant rotation of RCMP officers in and out of their posts, their assignments, I think there's something exciting about the prospect of a policing model where a kid who's born and raised in Wetaskiwin can imagine going to a police academy and signing up with the provincial police force and offering to protect her community for the rest of her life in a community that she knows so well and so intimately. That can be the heart of community policing. If you look at the recent KPMG report on policing, you'll see a very exciting proposed governance model, which includes mandatory, a clear and ongoing voice for municipalities, but also for Indigenous people. They are proposing permanent seats on a Alberta Police Commission for First Nations representatives. That would be the first time, I believe, in Canadian history that Indigenous people would have a share in the governance of a large police service like that, while we could also expand on reserve First Nations police forces. So I think there are many potential benefits, but this does require further detailed study. And that is why Minister Madhu is now moving out to a detailed consultation, particularly focused on you as municipal governments, because the rubber hits the road in your jurisdiction, but also with First Nations leaders. So please approach that consultation in a constructive spirit. And at the end of the day, I can tell you this, we can assure you that the models we are looking at would add zero additional net cost to municipalities. That is one of our criteria. Finally, I'll tell you, I do know, speaking to other premiers, that other provinces are looking at models like this. And I think I know there are a lot of people in Ottawa who believe that the entire field of contract policing for the RCMP needs to be reconsidered. So we need to be in this debate, and now is the right time. Now, finally, let me say, job number one for all of us, I believe, has to be economic recovery. Recovery after 5 tough years, after the last 20 incredibly challenging months. Do you know that at the bottom of the COVID recession in the second quarter of last year, our GDP was down to about $320 billion. In 2014, Alberta's economic output was $365 billion. I mean, it's hard to get my head around that. But our economy had declined by about 10% over the previous 5 years, and then declined by another 10% at the worst of the COVID crisis. And we saw private sector incomes go down by about 10% on average across the province. Many people moving from high-paying long-term jobs to huge pay cuts and intermittent work. Of course, at the height of COVID, we saw an unemployment rate of 23%. The impact of this on people has been real. When we look at the addictions and mental health crisis, the opioid public health crisis in Alberta, of course, much of that has been driven by this economic adversity, by people who have lost their financial stability and sometimes their families and their businesses and their hope as a result. So we must all work together to turn that around. And that's why Alberta last summer announced our recovery plan, a bold plan to build, to create jobs and to diversify our economy while building on our traditional strengths as a province. Because we don't believe that oil and gas and diversification are in opposition to one another. We believe that a strong energy sector is actually one of the greatest levers for diversification. Witness the huge growth of the petrochemical sector here and the emerging hydrogen economy. We're doing this by creating the best macroeconomic conditions possible with the lowest taxes on businesses in Canada and perhaps soon in North America. We've eliminated 120,000 red tape restrictions on economic growth in Alberta, about 20% of the regulatory burden. We are investing in our workforce, the largest ever jobs training program in Alberta history. We have targeted incentives to increase the speed of diversification, like the petrochemical incentive program, the film and television tax credit. We are pushing forward investment promotion with the Invest Alberta Corporation. The new president, Rick Christians, is here, and I invite you to meet with him. And we want Invest Alberta to collaborate with your local regional economic development authorities as Team Alberta to go out and hunt as a pack around the world to attract new job-creating investment in the province. And you know what, folks? It's working. Here's the exciting thing. Alberta is leading Canada in economic growth by a country mile. We are projected to expand our economy by 6.7% this year. We are projected to lead again next year. We have the second fastest growing job growth in the country. 65,000 net new jobs created in the past 4 months. Unemployment fell by nearly 0.5% last month. And incomes are starting to come back up. And we are seeing it right across the board. The best year ever in the history of our forestry industry. The best year ever by far. In film and television, we used to have maybe $200 million a year of work in that industry. It's now $1 billion this year. We have 8 major productions underway simultaneously right now. Fort Macleod saw the zombies from The Last of Us wandering around. Don't be afraid. That's the biggest production in Canadian film or television history. They chose Alberta. And they told me, the head of HBO told me that we beat every state in the United States, every jurisdiction around the world in our value offering. We have the best year ever in the tech, digital, and innovation sector. The best year ever in the formation of venture capital, which is the jet fuel for the tech sector. We've seen the announcement of billions of dollars of major new tech investments coming to Alberta, representing thousands of jobs. Most recently, by far the largest tech investment in the history of our province, $4.3 billion from Amazon Web Services, creating hard, permanent infrastructure to service the cloud around the world from Alberta, creating 1,000 jobs. And I can tell you, we are working with some of the world's other major tech companies that are well advanced on plans to establish a large footprint. We are in a revolution when it comes to moving into the digital economy here in Alberta. The startup economy will be kick-started by that. We are seeing massive expansion, as I said, of the petrochemical sector. And I believe will be at the heart of the emerging global multi-trillion-dollar hydrogen economy. And these are the Grand Prairie Northern Petrochemicals announcement of last week, $2.5 billion, 4,000, and I shouldn't say Grand Prairie, but Greenview County, but in collaboration with Grand Prairie, 4,000 upfront construction jobs, 400 great ongoing jobs for a net zero ammonia plant. That ammonia will help us to carry our hydrogen to global markets, and these new hydrogen projects also help us to reduce emissions in our economy while maintaining a demand for our natural gas. It's a win-win-win-win, a win for our traditional industries, a win for the environment, a win for our ESG performance, and a win for jobs. So these are exciting times, and Alberta is on a roll. Alberta is coming back with strength and with prosperity because of our entrepreneurial culture. Let's make the most of it by collaborating, by working together as Team Alberta for a bright and prosperous future. Thank you very much.